So, this is one of those films that's kind of hard to review. Not because it's hard to gauge its quality, but because a discussion of it starts to leak into the questions that it posed and where you stand on those questions. And since this is a political movie, it means that starts to get into your political beliefs. As I'm sitting there, as I was walking out, I always try to frame how I'm going to come at these reviews. I don't write anything down clearly, but I try to think of bullet points real quick to kind of go through, and every time I was doing that, I kept going back to, the questions the movie raised, the issues of it. And I try very hard in my real life, my social media life and all that, not to get involved with political talk. I really try, because you can't win. All right? It becomes an ugly, ugly thing the minute you bring up political beliefs or stances. So I'm kind of concerned that as I discuss this film, I'm going to get off on one of those rants. And if that happens, folks, it's going to happen. If my beliefs conflict with yours, then, that's the way the world works. But I try very hard not to get into that. But this movie poses some interesting ones. And honestly, that's a point in its favor. I like movies, especially in terms of political films, where you, the audience member, are kind of given the burden of answering the question for yourself, or at least asking the question, because in a lot of these cases, you can't really answer the question, at least not in my opinion. So I prefer that to a film that just is kind of preaching at you. And even though this film kind of comes down on one side, or at least it feels like it does, I think it also does a good job of showing the other side of it. So yeah, I think that's a point in its favor. But anyway, we're getting ahead of ourselves just a little bit. So if you haven't heard, and I'm not surprised if you hadn't, I had seen posters for this movie. This is one I haven't even seen a trailer for. I saw a poster for it, and I had to look up the trailer myself to figure out what the hell it was about. So what this is this is a true story, or based on a true story, however you want to phrase it, of a true story, of a presidential candidate, Gary Hart, from 1988, who was the front runner for the Democratic nomination, and a lot of people was thinking he was going to be president, apparently, and his campaign is derailed in like a 3-week period when a bunch of reporters catch him, in an affair with some chick, and the whole thing blows up. And where this film is coming at it, and I don't know how true this is, but the stance the film takes is that this was the beginning of tabloid journalism kind of taking over this country, and specifically our political discourse. The film is very adamant in saying that, this is kind of the first time this happened. I don't know how true that is. I don't even remember Gary Hart because I was 9 at the time, so I wouldn't really remember him. But the film is very clear in that stance. It's saying this was kind of the beginning of the culture we kind of find ourselves on the ass end of right now. And I don't mean on the ass end meaning it's over. I mean we have now elected an asshole. Sorry, but not sorry. And this is kind of the end result of some of that. So as I said, the movie raises some interesting questions. And raises them in the form of, this thing that I found myself debating this with myself as the movie was running. Where is the line? Where is the line for journalism when it comes to something like this? And I was thinking, we all know now that President Kennedy, fucked anything that moved and probably a couple things that didn't. But does that make his presidency invalid? Does that make the things he did and the change that he kind of brought, does that negate any of that? President Clinton is quite possibly one of the biggest sleazeballs to ever walk through the Oval Office until recently. But at the same time, the economy was great, jobs were good, the 90s were a pretty good time, all things considered. So does that personal element of what he did, does that negate any good that he might have done? All right. And then I find myself going back to the other side. It's like, well, that may be true, but at the same time, you got these, I'm sorry, I'm going to use a general term here, my apologies. You've got these guys up there, claiming that they should tell you how to run your life, and they're going to be making the decisions for you, and they're going to be making all these things that are going to affect your way of life negatively, positively, or whatever, and they can't keep their fucking dicks in their pants. Seriously, just off topic, how fucking hard is that, guys? Why is this such a problem? I get it, absolute power corrupts absolutely, but fucking just keep your dick in your pants. I think anybody who runs for office needs to get castrated. Well, to just end the problem right there. Running for office, goodbye balls. Let's make them all eunuchs. Just chop it right off. There you go. No more problem. They ain't sleeping around with nobody no more. We can be sure of that. Because, again, not to put too fine a point on it, look at the scuzzbag we have elected. So it is a very, it's a question with really no good answer. Where does the freedom of the press and this freedom and this right to know, where does that start to hinder the process? But the other side of the coin is, if you've got a guy who's talking about morals and ethics, as this guy clearly was, and he's sleep around on his wife every 5 seconds, what process is there? I mean, it's a complicated issue, because I at least can argue both sides of it and not come out with any kind of real answer. So those are the big ideas that this movie is putting out there. The movie seems to get behind. There's a line from 1776 where Adams and them, they're just about to sign the Declaration, and one guy is holding it up because they have an anti-slavery clause in it. And he says, you need to get rid of that clause or we're not signing. And Adams is against it, and Ben Franklin, is telling him you need to do it. And he says, well, if we do that, history's not going to forgive us. And Ben Franklin says, that's probably true, but what's history going to think we were? Demigods? We're people. We're no more, no less. We're flawed. We're imperfect. We're just trying to do the best we can. So the movie seems to be coming at it from that angle, that this was a flawed, imperfect person who had good ideas, at least from the movie standpoint. Again, I don't know anything about the guy personally, so I'm just going with what I saw in the film. Who had good ideas, who had, a stance, who really believed in his things, but was undone by his own weaknesses. So yeah, I like the big ideas, and I like that it gets me thinking, and I like that it's a question I can't really answer, because those are the ones you should be thinking about. Aside from the big questions, there's not a lot to talk about in terms of this, because everybody involved with it is so good at what they do that we should all know this by now. Hugh Jackman is one of the best actors working today, one of the most versatile actors working today. I mean, when you consider that the film we were talking about with him last year was a big, lavish musical. The one we were talking about Actually, no, that was last year too. Was also, one where he played, an old grizzled superhero. So the guy can play a lot of things and plays them all well. Plays them all extremely well. So so Hugh Jackman is, I think, that perfect everyman, undone by his own stupidity. Real great. The rest of the cast is filled out with, very reliable day players. J.K. Sims is in it. Alfred Molina, who doesn't have as big a part as I would like. Because Alfred Molina is always really great. One of the most underrated actors out there. Of course, it is funny now that I think about it that Jonah Jameson is running the campaign of Wolverine, and it's undone by news reports from Doctor Octopus. 6 degrees of Marvel movies. It's kind of like 6 degrees of Harry Potter. Anyway. So yeah, I think that the other thing the film does very well is something that you don't hear about, or you hear about it, but we always kind of write it off as whining or whatnot. But it really does show what the toll is for this kind of paparazzi lifestyle that we've adopted in terms of our reporting. What the casualties are for the family members, the wife, the children, the friends, the people who have backed him. And it's not to say that that's an argument against it, that you should ignore things and not report on things just because it's going to make somebody unhappy. But this idea of, being hounded by reporters and, having them camp out on your lawn, for something that in any other household would be dealt with internally. It would be dealt with between, when Joe Schlub down the street cheats on his wife and she finds out or he gets caught, he doesn't have to deal, and she doesn't have to deal with a billion reporters outside the gates asking about it every 5 seconds. They deal with it their own way. And, it's interesting to kind of see how you handle that when that's not the option for you. This movie isn't perfect. One of the things that I'm not a fan of with this movie was trying to be, I think, a little too artsy in certain ways with its conversation and its dialogue, and that it's got like 3 conversations going on and a side conversation going on over here. And as I'm thinking about this, it might have been the speakers in the theater, I don't know. But the side conversation's going on over here while J.K. Sims and Hugh Jackman are having a conversation here, but we're not really hearing the J.K. Sims Hugh Jackman conversation. We're more hearing this conversation over here, and we can't, it's like, I think their conversation is probably the more important, as they're the fucking ones on camera, and they're 2 of the named actors in the thing. So again, I don't know if that's a flaw with the sound system in the theater I was seeing it at, or if that's some kind of artsy directorial choice, but either way, your side conversations audio shouldn't be up that loud anyway. So just an interesting movie in terms of just what, because again, I'm not talking about the movie at all. I'm talking about the issues it raised, and again, I think that is a good thing. Was this guy a scumbag, or was he a fairly decent man who had some character flaws, who was undone by the system? Was the press that did this, were they in the wrong? Did they stoop to the lowest common denominator and give up on journalistic integrity for the sake of selling their paper? Or were they doing the job that they set out to do and uncovering the truth about somebody that, could have been elected president? Where is the line? And I think, again, not questions that could be easily answered. Oh, another thing I didn't like about this movie, and they only did this really at the beginning, is it had that a problem a lot of period pieces do, which is kind of sad to think that the 80s are a period now as opposed to, but, is that they name drop all these people at the very beginning who we know are going to be important, several years down the line. They mentioned, Tipper Gore and Al Gore, they mentioned a couple other people, I can't remember now. And you're just like, really? I mean, would their names have come up at that point? Again, I was 9, so I didn't know how important any of these people were at that time period. But, I find a lot of films based in other times tend to do that. The only other thing I can say is, as you watch this film, the film ends with Hugh Jackman giving the speech, which I assume was the actual speech that Gary Hart gave when he stepped down from the campaign. And the speech is talking about, the system needs to be, rewired. The system, we got to look at it because, it's, this isn't what we should be focused on. We should be focusing on the bigger issues, how to fix the country, and not the issues of, me cheating on my wife. And, if we don't do that, then it's going to discourage all of the best people from running for president, and we're going to be left with the dregs. And it's one of those things that I'm paraphrasing, naturally. It's one of those things that I'm listening to it, and I'm watching it, and I think this, and I'm like, buddy, you have no fucking clue how right you are on that. I don't know if it's the direct cause and effect, but think about our last election. That wasn't a fucking election. That was an episode of American Idol, where who said the most outrageous thing and who did this and who did that. It was a reality show, and the biggest jerk got the prize at the end. Think about, we just got done with a whole set of elections, and I can't speak for the rest of the country, but I can know from the ones here in Tennessee, every commercial was not, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I am going to try to do this, I'm going to try to do this. No, it was, this person, my opponent, is a shithead and spent all the money on booze and cigarettes and whores. And then the other person gets back, I didn't spend money on beer and cigarettes and whores, but what's-her-name spent all her money, all your tax money, flying to Tahiti to get blow. I mean, if you thought the integrity was gone then, buddy, you'd have a heart attack if you could see what it was fucking like now. And that is one reason why I have a hard time going to political movies, because they just make me mad, and then they make me sad. They had a Fathom event of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington not too long ago, and I was thinking I was going to go see it to do a retro review, and I was like, if I go see that, I'm just going to leave pissed off. And I love that movie, but it's just going to piss me off. I've gone so far off track on this one. And I'm wondering if the issues it raised and the questions it raises in me is distracting me from, weaknesses in the film. But I don't believe it is, at least from this vantage point. The film on whole is balanced. And I think you get to see both sides. You get to see why the press made the choices they did, why, some people were mad about it, but you also can, I like that. I like that a lot in my political movies. So I'm just going around in circles here. So I need to wrap this up, because I think, I think I've made my point. So final grade for the front runner, I'm going to give it a B+. And I'm not sure why it's not higher. There's just something kind of holding me back from it. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just my general distaste for politics and politicians and media. Because I kind of hate all those things. Honestly, if you want my honest opinion about it. So you have two shitty institutions that I don't really think much of in any case, and both of them are the centerpiece of a movie. Maybe that's holding me back. But I do like the questions it raised. I like the thought process it starts in me, and I think it'd be a good one to for the more politically minded of the people who watch these. I know I have a lot of friends who are very, very politically active. It might be a good one to go and check out, definitely. But go and check it out, and I must stress it, go and check it out with an open mind. Don't just jump on the one side or the other. But go and really look at both sides and make a discussion about it. Talk to people you go see it with. Do like I'm doing, is kind of venting your dumb ideas to whoever can't sleep and found this review at 3 a.m. and decided, well, this might be better than porn for 5 seconds. Anyway, fascinating political film, and those are hard to do, so I am very, my hat is tipped to those involved. All right, so that's this one. So 2 movies in one day. I always love it when I do that. Looking at the calendar, some other films that look a little interesting. We might check those out before I go back to work on Monday. Thanks for watching, and as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.